Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, here on this afternoon, and we have another, we have another slow day for basketball. Again, not really a lot of news to talk about, not really like news that would break the internet, like any sort of free agent signings, none of that, no big trades, none of that has happened yet, and well, none of that has happened anymore, and I don't really expect that to happen anymore, so we're just like waiting for the NBA season to start. So since we are waiting for the season to start, I might as well go ahead and talk about if I was a fan of a Northwestern Division NBA team. So I'll be talking about, teams like the Thunder, the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers. I've talked about these teams before, but I'll just, talk about them again. Their ceiling, sort of what I expect from them. Then in the second segment, I'm going to talk about the debate between Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry, because a lot of people on the internet were sort of talking bad about Nick Young and, Swaggy P, if you want to call him that, and his opinions on Kyrie Irving and Steph. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that and my opinions on that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, I'm going to talk about Gilbert Arenas and him agreeing with Anthony Edwards and his comments about Michael Jordan. And I'll just go ahead and talk a little bit about that argument and what I think about that. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to talk about some small little basketball, some small news going on about basketball. Like, for example, the new Netflix series that's going to be released according to some sources, as well as the debate between Russell Westbrook's number on his new team with the Denver Nuggets. And then in the fifth segment, I'm going to continue on I'm going to continue with the list of players that I think should have won the MVP in a certain year over some other players. And I know that it seems that the trend is like a majority of the players that I talk about have only won one single MVP in their career. But I mean, I can't really help that. If I feel like there's another player in the league that deserves to win the MVP over that player, then there's nothing I can really do. I'll say that again when I start the fifth segment. But before I begin with this first segment, I like to remind everybody that we love hearing from you guys during the show, whether you have a hot take or a burning question or something that you just wanted to say. We're all ears. This show is all about keeping the conversation lively, making sure that your voice is part of the mix. So don't be shy. Drop your thoughts in the chat. If you really want your comment to get mentioned on the show, you can hit the $ below the chat box and send in your super chat message, which is guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's also a great way to bring even more of your support to the channel. If super chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can donate that way. Either way really helps the show. It makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about these Western Conference teams. Yes, the Northwestern Division is made of Western Conference teams, and a lot of them were top teams in the Western Conference. So this team is incredibly top heavy and very, very competitive. And the three teams that I'm obviously going to be talking about first are going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets, as well as the Minnesota Timberwolves. And again, these teams, incredibly top heavy. All of them were tied in the exact same record in the regular season for last year. and it was like a really close battle between which of these two teams would end up taking the first seed and which of these two teams would end up taking the third seed. So the only real difference between the third seed and the first and second seed are the fact that the third seed is going up against an opponent that is guaranteed to be in the playoffs. Meanwhile, the number one and the number two seed, they have to play against opponents who might not even earn their spot in the NBA postseason, or they might, I don't know, like they might not have even been in the contention for the postseason if the play-in tournament didn't exist. Like, for example, maybe it was a 10-seeded team um, that the Thunder ended up playing of the instead of the eighth seed, which they ended up playing, which ended up being the Pelicans. So it's like that's really the only big difference between the one seed and the 1, 2 seed and 3 seed and the rest of the other seeds that are guaranteed to play in the postseason. So, it could affect the matchups, but most likely if you are the 1 seed, you belong in the playoffs, and if you are in any of the other seeds below that, there is a debate on whether you even belong in the playoffs. So technically the 1 seed should win regardless, and the 1 seeds and actually every single one of the 3 teams that I just mentioned ended up advancing all the way to the second round before either losing or winning and making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. Obviously, one of the teams would have had to, if they ended up making the Western Conference Finals, then the other part of the team, the other team would have most likely had to have lost before that, because chances are they would have to face up against each other in the postseason, either one of those teams. And again, the first team is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They were the number 1 seed. They ended up being one of the youngest number 1 seeds in NBA history. They lost in the second round after sweeping the Pelicans in the first round. They lost to the eventual Western Conference Finals champions in the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. And they were a 1 seed. And now they've improved with a lot of off-season additions. They have a lot to be excited about. They have the really decent young core. They added Caruso. They still have Giddey. They still have SGA. They have everyone that they could have lost or that they lost in the off season. They sort of just got better. And not to mention, Isaiah Hartenstein, adding him, that was a very good addition from the Thunder. And really, you could argue that they're just a much better team now than they were previously. And that could cause a lot of problems, especially in this division. So expect them to be title contenders for a pretty long time. And you should also expect the Denver Nuggets to be a title contending team for a while, at least for however long they have Nikola Jokic on the team. And for last season, again, they were tied with the 1 seed, but they ended up getting the 2nd seed, and they lost in the second round. They ended up losing to the Timberwolves. They had a huge lead in going into the second half of Game 7, but they ended up blowing that lead to the eventual winners of the game, the Minnesota Timberwolves. And really, the success of the Denver Nuggets and their season is all detrimental to how good Jokic can play in the regular season, and as well as Jamal Murray in picking up his slack. Now, the biggest addition of the offseason is a 36-year-old Russell Westbrook, and their biggest loss this offseason was a top 100 NBA player in KCP. And I mean, you're still contending because you have Jokic, but are the pieces that you have on your team enough? That's really that's how I'd feel if I was a fan, especially considering how embarrassingly the Nuggets ended up losing to the next team that I'm about to mention. And like, clearly, like, the pieces that they had that won a championship for them before, it just wasn't enough to compete in this Western Conference. Now, you could argue that if Jokic had a much better game than he did in game 7, like if he was able to close out the game scoring a couple more points, then they wouldn't be in this situation. Yes, that is true. But again, adding Westbrook to the team hasn't really proven that you get championship success. And, if I was a betting man, I would bet that Westbrook would be traded off of the team right after this year. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So next team on this list, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they ended up beating the Denver Nuggets in Game 7, but they lost in the Western Conference Finals after winning only one game. And really, if I was the Timberwolves in this, I don't see a single reason for them not to want to run it back. They look very dominant against Phoenix and in the win against Denver last year in Game 7. If they end up, returning to the postseason and they end up playing the same kind of ball that they were playing in this postseason, then really I think the Timberwolves can beat anyone. So they just have to hope that, Karl Anthony Towns can pick up some end, because like I feel like really if Cat plays a lot better for the Timberwolves, then, especially than how he did in this recent postseason, then they could go really, really far. And like Anthony Edwards, he plays well most of the time, but it's like, Cat could really, really start picking up some of this slack. And like I would personally think that a majority of the success from the Timberwolves is going to have to come from whether or not Karl Anthony Towns can produce. And I wouldn't expect an instant impact from the rookies, but if they want to go far, then I think that that's exactly what they're going to need. Now, next team on this list is the first team that wasn't in the postseason in this division, and that is the Utah Jazz with Lauri Markkanen. They were a 12th seed last season. Obviously, they did not make the play-in. And Lauri, really, the only thing that the Utah Jazz have going for them is Lauri Markkanen. The only thing Lauri Markkanen has going for him is the tremendous amount of money that he just signed for with the Utah Jazz. So the current focus for Utah is probably going to develop a young core and being in the race for Cooper Flagg, because Cooper Flagg is a really popular pick in this draft. And in a perfect world, the number 15th seed is going to be Utah's in the future. In a perfect world, obviously, that doesn't really happen all that much, but we'll see how the draft goes, and we'll see how the lottery goes, and we'll see how the teams end up working, and we'll see if the Jazz even end up being in contention, because who knows. And finally, the bottom feeder of arguably the entire Western Conference in general, the Portland Trailblazers. Now, obviously, they're the 15th seed. They were one of the worst teams in the entire NBA. That's usually what happens when you lose somebody as talented as Damian Lillard. They're probably not. They're really like a thorn in the Jazz's spine, because like if Portland wasn't so bad, then maybe the Jazz would be able to lose a little bit more and be able to get a higher placement in the draft. But really, I think that the Portland Trailblazers are going to end up getting the 15th seed in the they're going to end up getting the 15th seed in the entire division, in the entire conference, excuse me, and it's not even going to be a competition, and they'll be able to trade Jeremy Grant and flip him for draft compensation to develop young guys, as well as Klingon and Denny additions to the team that they recently got in the draft. They could use those to really make their squad even better than what it is now. And that's all that I have for this first segment. Again, let me know in the comments what you guys think of these teams. Do you guys think that which one of these teams do you think can make it all the way? Which one of these teams do you think is going to lose quicker than the next? Or do you think that maybe the three teams, they're going to see each other in the Western Conference Finals this year instead? Or maybe some other kind of scenario that you're thinking of. But let me know in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and go to a short break and then go to the next segment where I talk about the debate between Kyrie Irving or Stephen Curry. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I'm going to talk about the debate between Kyrie Irving or Stephen Curry, and really just exactly which one of them I think is better and which one of them really deserves the more demands more respect when you bring up their name in debates. And before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we do love to hear what you guys have to say for the show, whether it be a burning question, whether it be a hot take, or something that you've just been dying to say. We are all ears. Don't be shy to drop in your thoughts in the chat. And if you really want to help the show, and if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, you can go ahead and use Super Chat. Just click the $sign below the chat box, send in your message, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's a great way to support the channel. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker or the link in the description, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can really help the show that way. Either way, it really helps the show. It doesn't matter which one you do. And with that out of the way, we can go ahead and we can talk about this second segment, which is about Kyrie Irving or Steph Curry. Now, obviously, when you are going to think about the best point guard in the history of basketball, a lot of people are going to think of Steph Curry now, especially after these recent Olympics. Like Steph Curry winning the Olympics and Steph Curry winning that championship later with Golden State has really bolstered his resume, not to mention him being able to win the Finals MVP in that year. And I mean, again, winning a gold medal is a very big deal, especially since this is the first time that Steph has ever won an international gold medal for the United States, especially as a starter and as a very pivotal starter for the United States. Now, he's widely regarded as the best shooter in the history of basketball, not just in the NBA, but in the history of basketball. Like, I mean, you really have to be a completely different kind of person to be considered the best shooter ever. And he is one of the biggest reasons for the success of Golden State. Obviously, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant have a lot to say about that. But Steph Curry has 4 rings. All 4 of them have come from winning with the Golden State Warriors. And he was recently, a lot of people considered that he was undervalued by a former NBA guard in Nick Young. Now, if you guys know who he is, Swaggy P, he last played for the Denver Nuggets in the NBA, but he's also most known for playing alongside Steph when they won a championship in 2018. So they did win a championship together, but it's more like an infamy thing, I guess, if you're Nick Young, because it's like Nick Young wasn't a very competent player at the time, and he wasn't a very detrimental piece for the Golden State Warriors in winning a championship that year. Obviously, the main focus was on the starters: Steph, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. All 4 of those guys were key detrimental pieces for the team. And recently, Nick Young, he said that Kyrie Irving, the point guard that Steph Curry matched up against in the finals for 3 years in a row, is better than Steph, which is kind of ridiculous when you consider the accolades that Stephen Curry has compared to the accolades that Kyrie has. So it's like, I mean, a lot of the biggest reason why the comparisons get made is because these 2 point guards matched up a lot against each other in the postseason, not to mention having some similar teammates in their careers as well. Like Kyrie Irving played with Kevin Durant. Steph Curry played with Kevin Durant before Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is going to play with Klay Thompson. Steph Curry played with Klay Thompson way before Kyrie Irving did. And now all that's left is for Steph Curry to play with LeBron. But aside from that, Nick Young, he tweeted about how Kyrie is, like, this is exactly what the tweet said. Kyrie is the Kobe to Curry MJ. People scared to say he's better. So basically, what a lot of people were getting at is that Nick Young was saying that Kyrie Irving is a much better point guard than Steph Curry, which I don't believe is true whatsoever. Like, Steph Curry, again, his resume precedes him. Like, his resume talks for him, like, it speaks for itself. Like, there's no need to bring up his resume because everybody already knows who he is. Everybody knows he is one of the greatest three-point shooters that the NBA has seen. The only thing that people really know Kyrie Irving for is, like, it's really kind of an infamy thing. It's what he said towards the media. That's like one of the few things that he's known for. But again, like, Kyrie, he is not saying that he's not a very talented guard, but he's mainly brought up in these comparisons because of the matchups against Steph Curry in the NBA Finals. Again, Kyrie and Steph, they matched up against each other in several years. They matched up in 2016, they matched up in 2017, and they were also, I mean, they technically matched up in 2015, but Kyrie Irving ended up getting injured, but they matched up in a lot of finals. And a lot of the finals appearances that they've had were told over and over and over again. And, you know, Kyrie might have been injured for a couple of those finals appearances, but in a majority of the time when Kyrie was in the finals, he would completely outplay Steph Curry. Like, Kyrie in the 2016 postseason, just in the 2016 postseason. Like, I mean, if you look at his game log, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'll go ahead and just bring up his game log right here so you guys don't have to worry about it. But in 2016, in the finals, when he played against the Golden State Warriors, obviously, everyone remembers his 41-point game against the Golden State Warriors in Game 5, but you also might forget that Kyrie Irving for that entire postseason was averaging 27 points per game and shooting 40% from three, 46% from the field, and 93% from the free throw line. And he, again, that 41 point performance in that NBA Finals was super impressive and all that. But that wasn't even, you could argue that wasn't even his best performance in the finals, because in 2017, Kyrie he averaged 29 points, averaged 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 41% shooting from three, 47% shooting from the field, and 90% shooting from the free throw line. So it's like Kyrie against Steph Curry in a lot of these matchups tend to be a much better player than when you look at somebody like Steph Curry. So like I'll bring up Steph Curry's game log in both of these finals, and we all know that in 2016 Steph Curry did not have a great finals. He definitely did not have a finals that he wanted to remember. He dropped 17 points in that elimination game. He only averaged 22 points per game, and he shot 40% from three, but he only shot 40% from the field, 92% from the free throw line, and again, 22 points as Steph Curry, the unanimous MVP. That is not ideal shooting. He was also a distant third best player in the finals behind somebody like, let's say, Kevin Durant or even LeBron. In the next finals that he played against, I know he averaged 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists, but he did shoot 38% from three, and he shot 40% from the field. And, I mean, obviously those assist numbers and those averages that he was getting were ridiculous, but again, a lot of people, you might consider that inflated, because for majority of that postseason, I mean, he was with Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, and they were just ridiculous help in that category as well. So that's like one of the biggest reasons as to why a lot of people would like even consider comparing these two in a debate, because of their finals appearances and their matchups in the finals and how Kyrie would tend to outplay him. But aside from that, again, like the accolades, they really speak for themselves, because it's like Steph Curry, he has 2 MVPs. Kyrie Irving doesn't have a single MVP. Steph Curry has a finals MVP, something that Kyrie Irving doesn't have. Steph has more rings. Kyrie Irving has only been able to win with LeBron. Steph Curry has won with and without Kevin Durant, and he won before Kevin Durant got there. He won after Kevin Durant got there. The only thing that is really, like, I guess you could say detrimental to Steph is that he has not won a playoff game yet without Klay Thompson. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, if that's really what's going to stop you from saying that Steph Curry is better than Kyrie Irving, then you might just be a Kyrie Irving fan and you might have a certain amount of bias. Again, that is just what I would think, because in my opinion, Steph Curry is, again, he's in the argument for one of the best point guards in the NBA. There is no reason why Kyrie Irving should be even in that conversation. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that Kyrie Irving is a little bit underrated? Do you guys think that he is properly rated? Do you think that he should be in the conversation as one of the better point guards in the NBA? Or do you think that Steph Curry being better than him isn't a problem? Because, I mean, I don't think it's a problem if Steph Curry is a better point guard than Kyrie Irving. But now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk about Gilbert Arenas and him agreeing with Anthony Edwards' statement about Michael Jordan. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about that in the third segment right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, I'm going to be talking about Gilbert Arenas and his comments in regards to Michael Jordan, as well as him agreeing with, sort of agreeing with Anthony Edwards' comments and how everybody is a little bit upset at Gilbert for doing so. Now, a lot of people, if you don't really follow Gilbert on his podcast, then you might not know that Gilbert isn't really a fan of a lot of players. Like, he's not really he doesn't really have many favorites. Not only does he not have many favorites around the league, but he doesn't have many favorite players around the league either. And him talking bad about the rest of the players in the 80s and 90s is not something that I really expected. Now, I would say, a lot of people that have respect for Michael Jordan, I usually expect them to have respect for a lot of the players that either came before him as well, or maybe some of the players that played alongside him as well. But it doesn't seem like a lot of the it doesn't seem like there are a lot of players that really think very highly of anyone else at that time aside from Michael Jordan. So, according to this article, Gilbert Arenas recently shared his picks for his all-time Team USA starting five, and notably, for some reason, he left out MJ. However, regarding the NBA, Arenas holds a different opinion about Michael Jordan. Recently, Anthony Edwards had claimed that MJ was the only player in his era with any sort of skill, though for the claim, he received a pile of backlashes from the former players, and most notably in Magic Johnson. Arenas came forward recently in support of these claims from the Minnesota guard, and on a recent show, on a recent episode on Gil's Arena, which is, his podcast that he has, he shared his thoughts on the discussion, saying basically all Jordan's competition in that era did not even have the physical tools to keep with him. So he was basically a Bugatti, and that's a very funny analogy. He was basically a Bugatti and everyone else was a Honda Civic. All the shooting guards were 6'4" and under. They didn't have no jumping ability, right? Arenas said. Well, that I don't really think that's entirely true, because it's but again, the quote continues. So who he went against, he's saying they weren't talented, meaning they weren't athletic to keep up with them today, Arenas added. Well, I want to go ahead and rebuttal that claim real quick. Just give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that I'm actually right, because there is one player that immediately comes to mind. Okay, so Gilbert Arenas, he says that there was nobody athletic back in the day. There was all the shooting guards were 6'4" and under, and they didn't have the jumping ability. Well, there was this shooting guard. He played for the Portland Trail Blazers. His name was Clyde Drexler. I don't know if you guys heard of him, but he is 6'7". He played the shooting guard, and he was an all-star in 1986. He was an all-star in 1988, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. And a lot of people, they gave him this nickname called Clyde the Glide, right? And he was, from what I've heard, he was able to really, because his nickname was Glide, he just could fly. So he could fly so far, he was just a ridiculous scorer. I mean, he was 6'7", and he was a shooting guard. So what do you mean there was no shooting guard back in the day that was able to... Oh, and he was also on the NBA's top 75 team, the anniversary team that a lot of great players were on. Yeah, he was on that team. And, a lot of people were saying, Gilbert is saying that there was nobody in the league that could really had the frame or the height or anything else like that to compete with him. Well, I just gave you one right there. And should also be noted that Clyde came second in MVP race. He also is on the NBA 75th team. Meanwhile, Gilbert Arenas is not. So unfortunate for that. But again, there's a player for you that could have guarded Michael Jordan. And as we saw in the postseason in 1992, Michael Jordan could not be checked, regardless of the fact that Clyde Drexler is indeed 6'7". He is also a shooting guard. He has to guard Michael Jordan. So what gives? To me, that doesn't make any sense. I don't think that's a very decent claim, and no one else really thought that was a really decent claim either. Gilbert Arenas is no longer in the NBA, yeah, but his take on current and former players often brings his name back into a lot of discussion, and not primarily for good reason. And similar to Anthony Edwards, Arenas also faced criticism from a lot of fans, and they argued that several other notable stars deserve to be included in the discussion alongside Michael Jordan, which I do agree with. I do think that there are a lot of players back in the day that deserve that same recognition for being one of the very few players that have skill, I guess you could say. Skill is it's a very umbrella term. What a lot of people consider skill, someone else might not really consider skill. For example, scoring a bunch of layups 24/7, a lot of people really don't consider that skill, right? Despite the numbers and despite the crazy amount of points that they're able to produce in the paint, a lot of people don't consider that skill. For example, a lot of people say that Shaquille O'Neal backing down defenders isn't something that should be considered as skilled. And I might agree with that, but at the same time, I might not agree with what someone else might not consider skill. So, for example, Giannis Antetokounmpo, I do think he does have a pretty decent bag and a pretty decent amount of skill for a player with his height and a player with his, his frame, his strength, and just the overall advantages that he has on the court, and the way that he's able to utilize those advantages to create several disadvantages for his defender is something that's very, very skilled. But a lot of people might not really consider that skill. A lot of people might just consider that running and dunking. And see, what I said before I said running and dunking, it sounded like, the player had a lot of skill, but then I dumbed it down a little bit, and now it sounds like the player doesn't really have all that much skill. And that I might just be gassing him up. But this is exactly what they're doing to a lot of Michael Jordan and a lot of the takes that are surrounding Michael Jordan right now in the NBA. And again, a lot of people, they don't agree with this take. I'm not one of those people. Let me know in the comments what you think of this take. Do you agree with Gilbert Arenas? Do you think he is just absolutely ridiculous? Do you think that there could have been some other players back in the day that could have contained him? Do you think that there are other tall players that played the shooting guard that could have also contained him? Because that shooting guard quote really baffled me. I understand that the players might not have been as athletic, but I mean, tall was a very demanding aspect of the sport. And it's been a very demanding aspect of the sport for a very long time. So I'm very surprised at that comment. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. I'm going to go ahead and go into a break and then go into the next segment where I talk about some basketball news, some of which are regarding Russell Westbrook and the number change the crisis around his number change, as well as some other basketball news like the new docuseries that Netflix is going to produce with some of the NBA players that are going to be in it. I'm going to talk a little bit about that right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, I'm going to be talking about a couple of news-related topics about basketball. So it's going to be a couple of different things. And I think what I'm going to talk about first is the Netflix documentary, the Netflix docuseries that is apparently going to be released. It's been in the works for a couple of years now, but now Netflix is finally going to debut the first episode on October 9th. And the series, it's called Starting Five. And the players that are going to be interviewed for this and that are on the series are LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, Jimmy Butler, and Domantas Sabonis. So this is going to be, these interviews, they took place during the 2023-24 season, giving viewers an unfiltered view of life at a pinnacle of professional basketball. That was the quote. So, Uninterrupted, the production company co-founded by James, is producing the series with Maverick Carter serving as an EP. So, former President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama are also among executive producers, with their High Ground serving as one of the production companies, as is Peyton Manning through his Omaha Productions. So, a lot of people are in the works in making this series. Now, this has been in the works for nearly a year, and this is a 10-episode docuseries, and it's going to make its debut before the NBA season, and obviously it's going to be very interesting to listen to Tatum's side of the story, because Tatum ended up winning a championship for the Boston Celtics, and out of every single one of these teams, and out of every single one of these players, was the only one that really had a very nice, deep playoff run that wasn't either riddled with injury or anything of that nature. I don't know if there's going to be anyone else that was interviewed for this documentary. I don't know if it's just the players that was just mentioned. I don't know if maybe we'll get an interview from De'Aaron Fox. I don't know if Bam Adebayo is going to be in there. I don't know if anyone else is going to be in the works of that. But we do have those main players, and I mean, aside from Jimmy Butler, I do understand. I maybe would have rather had someone like Jokic instead of Jimmy Butler, but I mean, I don't really think you can get Jokic to sit still in an interview. But again, who knows what you can get that man to do? But again, a lot of people there involved. And the series is going to be it's arguably going to be one of the biggest sports docuseries to date for Netflix, given all of the star power that's involved in this series. Netflix, they broke into the genre, and they hit on shows like Formula One, and well, actually no, they hit on shows like the Formula One series Drive to Survive and the PGA Tour series Full Swing, and it has since, expanded into a wide array of sports documentaries. Manning and Omaha previously partnered with the NFL for the series Quarterback, which was picked up for another season as receiver for this season, while the Obamas are also producing a series about some of the 2024 Olympic basketball teams. So that's a lot of stuff that's in the works for these all of these sports teams, and sort of just how Netflix is looking to work about it in the sports world. So, a lot of things are coming. Now, really, there are other sports documentaries in the works at Netflix, including projects like a Simone Biles documentary, as well as a documentary on the Dallas Cowboys. Ugh. But there's also, it's been really competitive with several other leagues and athletes all trying to get their own projects out there, given the high profile and reception from some of the films and series that have hit the market. And other streaming services entered the space as well, like Amazon with Jason Kelsey and their documentary. It's a very competitive landscape, so it's you have to plan it accordingly. And I think with all of these people in production, with all the popular names, and with the people that are actually in the documentary itself, I think a lot of people are going to be rather interested in a series like this. And when you get a lot of people interested, immediately you're just going to that's success right there. And I mean, you can't really argue with that. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the next part of this segment with the basketball news, and this is going to be regarding Russell Westbrook and his jersey number. So a lot of people, they were really a little bit uppity about Christian Braun, who is a player for the Denver Nuggets. Previously, for the last season, he wore number 0, and a lot of people thought that he was going to give up the number to Russell Westbrook, considering how number 0 is Westbrook's most iconic number. He wore that for the Thunder, he wore that for Houston, he wore that for LA, even though it was more infamously known in LA. And he also wore that aside from the Lakers, he wore that for the Clippers, which was a little bit better, but again, still a lot to be desired. But a lot of people expected Russ to want the number as well, but it turns out that that fiasco ended up amounting into nothing, as Westbrook explained that he never really wanted to change jersey numbers with Christian Braun. And I mean, it's not like we haven't seen Westbrook wear a completely different number aside from number 0. We've seen him wear number 4 for the Washington Wizards and his time with the team over there. It wasn't like it was a bad time either. I mean, he did still average a triple-double for the season, but apparently a lot of people, with this report coming in, they're saying that he won't be wearing number 0 for next season. And after joining the Denver Nuggets in free agency, and after being traded by the Clippers to the Jazz and then brought out of his contract to sign elsewhere, there were a lot of questions about what jersey number he would end up wearing, because, Braun was obviously wearing number 0. And I mean, Hunter Tyson recently, he agreed to switching his number to number 5, which allows Russell Westbrook to that opens up space for Russell Westbrook to being named number 4, which was one of his former numbers. And this could be the second time that we see Russell Westbrook wear that number, as we've seen him wear it before. But again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that Westbrook should really wear number 0? Do you guys think he should wear number 4? Would you rather see him wear a completely different number altogether? Or, I mean, is this just where the conversation of Westbrook's number debate, is this where it finally ends? And also, let me know in the comments what you guys think Westbrook is going to do for the season. Do you think he's going to do great things? Do you think he'll finally be able to win a ring with the Denver Nuggets this season? Do you think this will be the year? Do you also think that Russell Westbrook is going to be able to pass the all-time triple-double record and because previously when Russell Westbrook was on the Lakers, he was unable to break the triple-double record, as in getting more triple-doubles than the amount of triple-doubles that teams have, right? Getting like more triple-doubles individually than teams have like in their franchise. But he could never do that because when he was on the Lakers, he was, increasing the total for the Lakers as he was increasing the total for himself. But do you think he can finally overcome that and he can finally do that in the future? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But aside from that, we're going to go ahead and go into the final segment where I talk about an NBA player who I feel like deserved to win an MVP in a specific year. We're still in the 90s, so spoiler alert, it might be involved with Michael Jordan. So be sure to stay tuned for that if you're interested in what that segment holds. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I'm going to be talking about... Hold on just one second. Let me just get centered real quick. There we go. I'm going to be talking about an NBA player who I feel doesn't deserve to win an MVP in a specific year. So again, we're doing the 90s. So the year that we're on is 1993. And the player that ended up winning the MVP in 1993, who I think shouldn't have won the MVP that year, was Charles Barkley. Now, obviously, Charles Barkley, this is another MVP where a lot of people feel like Michael Jordan was robbed. It's another MVP that's popular that, again, the MVP that MJ won in 98, probably he shouldn't have won that, but a lot of people also think that Michael Jordan should have won an MVP in 1997 as opposed to Karl Malone getting the MVP. I mentioned in the last segment how MJ shouldn't have won the MVP in 1998, but I did also mention how in 97 he should have won the MVP, and the same story applies here in the 1993 MVP race. Now, again, this is like Michael Jordan we're talking about, so it's like this is obviously like the big time era where Michael Jordan was universally known as the best player in the NBA, but mainly because of voting fatigue, a lot of voters didn't really want to continuously vote for somebody like Michael Jordan year in and year out. And it's one of those things that plagues a lot of NBA athletes in this league, voter fatigue. Like a lot of people, they get bored of voting for the same player every single year, and it's they like seeing a different winner. And Barkley, he had a lot of things going for this MVP race. I'm not saying that he's not a considerable winner for this award, but a lot of people mainly remember this MVP as one of the MVPs that Michael Jordan was robbed in. Now, Barkley this season, he sort of rewrote the narrative of him being a team cancer, because back on Philly, a lot of people didn't really, consider him as a team caliber player, and a lot of people didn't really think he could be a very dominant force in the league and take a team to a pretty decent record in the regular season, as well as a pretty decent record in the postseason. Like, nobody really expected that coming in from him. And the Suns, they ended up getting the best record in the entire regular season in the NBA, and they were a very competent team. The Bulls, they weren't really as dominant in this regular season as they were in previous regular seasons, but like, for example, in 1991 and in 1992, you could argue that they had a lot better regular seasons than in this one. But Michael Jordan, again, like, this is still the MVP we're talking about. Michael Jordan was clearly the better player in this season. And, you know, Charles Barkley, he averaged 26, 12, and 5 for the season, which, you know, it's very, very impressive. I'm not saying that it is not impressive at all. And, like, those numbers, like, they're definitely MVP caliber numbers. I'm not saying that they're not. But Michael Jordan, I mean, he was averaging almost 33 points per game. He was also averaging 7 rebounds, as well as being able to average almost 6 assists for that year, and was also able to account for far better advanced stats than Charles Barkley in that season. And so if I was to give the MVP vote to anyone in 1993, I would give it to Michael Jordan. And what makes it even crazier is that Michael Jordan, despite the ridiculous season that he had, he didn't even finish second in the MVP race, which it baffles me how he didn't finish second. But Hakeem, for the Houston Rockets, Hakeem Olajuwon, he actually ended up finishing second in the MVP race for this year. And his averages for the season are nothing short of impressive. He averaged 26 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.8 steal, and he was also able to average 4.2 blocks. Again, 4.2 blocks. That is a lot of blocks to average through the span of playing 82 games. And I mean, I guess, like, when you think of the defense that brings, 4.2 blocks is ridiculous. And it makes sense how he didn't, like, how he was, like, second in the voting. Like, but again, I would have much rather seen, and I would have much rather preferred having Michael Jordan as the winner of the MVP, because let's face it, we know he was the best player in 1993. There's no question about that. It doesn't matter whether you think of the regular season, whether you think of the postseason, Michael Jordan was clear-cut the best player. And again, Hakeem and his averages, playing 82 games, averaging 26 points, 13 rebounds, 4 blocks, along 52% shooting from the field, is very impressive. But again, would have much rather liked to seen the vote go to Michael Jordan and winning the MVP in this specific race. So that is all that I have for this segment, and that's all that I have for the podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. I'm almost done with this MVP list. Let me know if you would like me to talk about a little bit more. Maybe I can do a finals MVP list. Like, maybe I can talk about players who I think maybe deserve to win the finals MVP over a specific player. Maybe I can talk a little bit about that. And but let me know in the comments what you guys would like to hear. And again, we invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. And whether you have a burning question, hot take for the game, something you've been dying to say, we are all ears. And if you really want to make sure that your comment or question gets noticed, you can go ahead and use Super Chat. You could just hit the $ below the chat box, send in your message, and it's guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's also a great way to support our channel. And if Super Chat isn't really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show. Either one of those makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all I have for you today on this show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.